Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Yang. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm a current college freshman, and I'm also the founder of Timeless. Today, I'd like to share with you a bit about my story as an journey as an entrepreneur. A bit about me. I was born in Hong Kong. I love cats and everything about cats. I love food, particularly the Southeast Asian food I grew up eating. But most of all, I love to code. I began coding when I was around 6 years old. I distinctly remember sitting down on the couch after school in the afternoons with my heavy laptop and playing around with Scratch. Scratch is a tool that was developed by MIT to teach kids how to code with block-by-block programming. I loved playing around with the tool. It was full of sprites that I could rotate and bounce around the screen. I would bounce these cartoon cats around and change their colors by clicking together these blocks of code. And slowly but surely, by looking at other people's projects, learning about more complex structures. I was amazed by the extraordinary range of things I could create with just a couple blocks of code. Whether it was a game or an animation, it was something unique that I could share with the rest of the world. Then those animations became mobile apps, when I would take my heavy laptop and take the bus across town to MIT App Inventor classes. The classes were run by First Code Academy, which was one of the first coding schools in Hong Kong. It was a pretty novel concept back then. We went through the usual series of loops, logic, user interfaces, but still in the block-by-block environment. It was the first time that I learned about developing mobile apps. It was also one of the first times that I was one of the youngest in the room, starting to learn how to code very young. And it was also probably one of the first times I was the only girl in the room, which would become pretty common in the rest of my computer science journey. My interest in coding continued to expand, and also eventually in computer science continued to grow. I took online classes in HTML and CSS and learned Java with books about the language. Then around 7 years ago, I moved from Hong Kong to the US. And in the midst of moving from some of the mildest winters in Asia to the shockingly cold winters of the northeastern US, I participated in the Technovation Challenge, a global technology entrepreneurship competition for girls. My best friend and I decided to enter the competition, and we wanted to tackle the problem of concussions, which was and is a huge issue in contact sports. We went to the drawing board and decided to create an app called Concussion Checker, which would help parents and teachers and coaches easily evaluate head injury for the possibility of concussion. We worked tirelessly over spring break and completed a working prototype of the app as well as an accompanying business plan. Working on our submission for the Technovation Challenge was my springboard into a whole different level of technology, using technology to help my community and to solve real-world problems. We were fortunate enough to make it all the way to San Francisco, where we competed in the finals, and we were lucky enough to win second place globally. That was the first time that I was in a room full of girls who were all passionate about using technology for good. It wasn't just about, a couple blocks of code to make a game, but about, using technology as a strength, as a tool, as a platform where a middle school girl could create something that could impact people around the world. I could create apps and help to benefit people that I had never met. Concussion Checker was developed in App Inventor. After Technovation, I really wanted to learn about how to create apps for iOS, for iPhones and iPads. I was 11 years old at the time, and I tried to enroll in the Flatiron School's high school iOS programming class. I was in 7th grade at the time, and so they thought I was too young, and they actually had to interview me to see if I was mature enough to take the class. But luckily, I did pass, and here I was learning about how to code in iOS. I had an amazing teacher who encouraged us to use our skills in creating apps for social good, for a social purpose. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, to create an app that could potentially benefit millions of lives. And it was that purpose that was the beginning of the journey I've been on for the past 5 years now as the founder of Timeless. So when I lived in Hong Kong, my grandmother would take care of me in the afternoons when my parents were at work. She would read to me, she would take me out to places. We spent a lot of time together. My mom always said that I took many things after my grandmother. Good things. The way I talk, the way I carry myself. I'm a little shadow of my grandmother. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, my grandma was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's affects everyone differently, but for my grandmother, the biggest impact on our family was how difficult it is now to have a conversation with her. She's often asking us what day it is or whether we've eaten yet, over and over again. In our 10-minute conversation together, she would have only asked me around 3 or 4 different questions. And it became difficult for me to share with her things like school and other things that I wanted to talk to her about, and increasingly so as the disease progresses. My grandmother's not alone. There are nearly 50 million people worldwide who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And by 2050, that number is expected to rise to 130 million. Prevalence is on the rise, but there's no cure. Like my grandmother, Alzheimer's patients have difficulty remembering events, taking new information, and recognizing family and friends. My grandmother still lives in Hong Kong, and the distance now doesn't make it any easier for us to connect with her. We call her often, but having a conversation is still difficult, especially now that we're not talking face-to-face. We've tried to cope by setting up visual aids around the house that she can see regularly and help to jog her memory. And we also have an iPad that we gave to her so her caregiver can show her photos of us to help remind her of us. She uses these often, but she still gets confused about everyday things and needs constant reminders. So as time went by, I started to wonder, is there a simple mobile app that could help my grandmother and other Alzheimer's and dementia patients to recognize the people around them and stay connected with friends and family? An app that consolidated everything that we were helping my grandmother to do to help her remember. So my family hunted extensively for such an app that we were sure must exist. But we came away disappointed because, in fact, it didn't. There are many tools in the market created for Alzheimer's, but none of them are created to help specifically the patients themselves. We also found that there are very few apps developed for the elderly in general due to the stereotype that old people can't use technology. They are the underserved demographic. So it was around that time that I was learning how to code in iOS, and I began to explore the idea of building an app that my family could use to help stay connected with my grandmother. I'd never built an app from scratch before, so I slowly navigated the process of learning how to prototype and build my own designs. After Timeless started to gain attention from the Alzheimer's community online, I began to see the app as materializing into something that just wasn't about my family or something that my family could benefit from, but possibly even people around the world. People started reaching out to me on Facebook and through my website, asking about when Timeless would be released and talking about loved ones who could really benefit from something like Timeless. And I began seeing Timeless as something that was larger than just my family, but could impact families just like mine around the world. At this point, I realized that I would need more guidance and more help to bring my idea into the real world. So I began cold emailing CTOs of facial recognition companies, UI UX designers, and Alzheimer's specialists, asking them for their guidance and their mentorship. Few of them replied, but those who did have become integral parts of Timeless's team. So over the past 5 years, I've worked with a UI UX designer who has generously been working with me pro bono to help ensure that Timeless is easy to use and super intuitive as possible. I've worked with an Alzheimer's specialist who I've worked with to assess what Alzheimer's patients need and could benefit from in an app like Timeless. I've also worked with the CTO of a startup based in Miami called Kairos, who provides the facial recognition technology for Timeless. They have all been tremendous helps in building Timeless into what it is today. After building out a fully working prototype of Timeless, I reached out to some VCs, venture capitalists, who were focused on funding startups with female founders, with no success. Fundraising was and still is one of the greatest challenges of being a young founder, a young entrepreneur. It's one thing to have an idea that you're really passionate about, but it's another thing to convince another person that they should be passionate about it too, passionate about it enough to give you money to make that happen. All the while being a young girl with no business experience and no working experience whatsoever. Fundraising and rejection is also where I learned the most, though, from my journey with building Timeless. I learned that it isn't just about one person or one idea that makes a successful startup, however you choose to define success. It's also about the combination of the person, the idea, and storytelling, telling the narrative about your startup and about the story that inspires others to act on your idea. So I took a piece of feedback that I got from one of the VCs I spoke to, which was to run a crowdfunding campaign to raise funds so that I could start Timeless's development. We ran an Indiegogo campaign in January of 2018 and raised over $10,000 from over 100 backers. A few months after that, Timeless hit a major milestone. We won the $50,000 grand prize of the Women's Startup Challenge hosted by Women Who Tech and Google in New York. It was wonderful to be named the youngest recipient of the award ever. But what's more important is the fact that among all of the amazing women founders who pitched that night, a 14-year-old was given the chance to be recognized and given the opportunity to show the world that she can. Because of the prize, Timeless was now fully funded and officially an incorporated startup. Timeless Innovations LLC was born, a huge milestone after 2 years of hard work. So what is Timeless? Timeless is a first-of-its-kind caregiver assistant mobile app that aims to empower Alzheimer's patients, their loved ones, and their caregivers to stay connected and engage with each other, and to address the daily challenges of the illness. So Timeless has a few core features. Timeless allows patients to receive photos from family and friends in a feature called Updates. So patients can scroll through and look at photos of events and daily happenings, while the faces in each of these photos are tagged with the names of everyone in the photo by AI-based facial recognition technology. Timeless also has a feature called Today, which simplifies daily information and weather information in a super intuitive and easy to understand format. And Timeless also allows patients to contact family and friends without having to remember phone numbers, and reminds them of repeated calling. So if they called someone in the last 5 minutes, it reminds them that they've already called in case they've forgotten. So where is Timeless today? After Timeless was fully funded, I worked with my advisors on a complete redesign of Timeless to make it even simpler, more intuitive, and more elegant than the prototype that I created myself. It was a long road working out the nitty-gritty of creating a smoothly running app that was available on the App Store. Surprisingly, it's not the high-level things that are a challenge when it comes to programming or developing a product. But you can realize that some of the smallest details can get tangled up with everything else and pose some of the trickiest challenges. A pile of revisions and iterations later, we soft-launched Timeless on the App Store in May of 2019, 1 year after Timeless was fully funded. After more iteration and more improvements, we launched Timeless globally in December 2019. And I've been continuing to improve upon Timeless and expand its reach ever since. One of our highest priorities has been making the app as accessible as possible to people around the world. That meant ensuring that Timeless isn't just accessible to people in the US or in English-speaking countries, but also around the world, especially in countries like China, Malaysia, and even in Europe, where Timeless was also getting a lot of response online and elsewhere, even before Timeless was launched. So last August, I released a translation of Timeless into both simplified and traditional Chinese. Since then, we've also translated Timeless into Spanish for Latin America and Spain, and we're continuing to work on other translations every day. We've reached thousands of Alzheimer's patients, caregivers, and families and friends so far, and it's constantly growing. My journey has given me unthinkable opportunities to travel around the world, sharing my story and using my voice and platform to encourage more girls and young people to pursue their passions, especially in technology. But I don't think any particular moment of my journey was a definitive beginning. I had no aha moment sitting on the couch on a hot fall afternoon in Hong Kong, making a game or sitting in an auditorium listening to teams of girls around the world pitching their solutions to problems they saw in their communities. None of these moments was a specific awakening revelation that I had to forge a path for myself to create something that was meaningful to me and potentially people around the world. My journey may have started when I saw myself as the youngest in the room, or the only girl in the room, or the only computer science nerd in the room. But I choose to think of it as a lot of small beginnings that have broadened my understanding of what it means to be a girl who's interested in technology and passionate about using computer science for good, who wants to change the world and wants to maximize her own ability to impact the world. Illnesses like Alzheimer's often make us feel very powerless. Rejection often makes us feel very powerless. But it was the thought of seeing how powerless patients like my grandmother are, and how powerless we can feel when we know that there was nothing that we could do to help her feel better, that inspired me to create Timeless. And it was rejection that led me to turn to crowdfunding and dozens of pitch competitions I submitted to before Timeless became a fully funded startup. My experience tells me that anyone at any age can make a difference if we are determined to do so. I was 12 years old when I started to build Timeless, and people often asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. Today, my answer is very simple. My dream is to bring the power and potential of emerging technologies to solve pressing real-world problems that we face today. You don't have to be a politician or a doctor to affect real change in the world. And don't let your gender be a barrier to pursuing your purpose. When you're driven to solve a problem for your community, whether it be with technology or elsewhere or otherwise, your mission and your purpose can drive groundbreaking ideas. That might be your new beginning. Thank you very much.